Welcome to the AA Podcast, our little corner of the web where we are not afraid to discuss tough questions like,
when did nutrition, health, movement, and stress management become alternative medicine?
Where we embrace challenges in all aspects of life to become healthier and stronger versions of ourselves.
And where food and movement are the best kinds of medicine, and cooking meals at home is a revolutionary act. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the AA Podcast. This is Ashley Olson.
And I'm Andrea Crane.
We are continuing our series on basically setting up your calories or macros, or how to set up your diet for different stages of your life. So last week we talked about setting up your macros for peri and postmenopause. So if you haven't already, I would highly recommend go back and listen to that one. That was quite informative and very helpful. So before we get into today's episode, as always, we're going to share our weekly Bible verse. And mine, I forgot to say where it's coming from. But there we go.
It sounds like a proverb or a psalm.
It does sound like a proverb
psalm,
verse.
I think.
Psalm 86:11. There we go.
There we go.
Psalms 86:11. Teach me thy way, O Lord. I will walk in thy truth. Unite my heart to fear thy name.
Okay, and mine is coming also from Psalm. We've been in the Psalms a lot. I feel like
just a good
it's
just
fall.
a good one.
That's right. We're getting contemplative.
Yes.
Psalm 73:26. My flesh and my heart fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever.
Love it. Well, today's episode is going to be talking about how to set up your diet, calories, macros, whatever you want to call it, for autoimmunity.
Yes. And so we've talked about, the first episode of this was kind of for, I hate to call them normies, but it's like all the people in the middle, right? Who don't have raging chronic disease, who aren't in perimenopause or menopause yet. And so, yeah, basically like, just your average people. Then we talked about those who are in the deep well that is perimenopause and menopause. And then so today we're going to talk about autoimmunity as our third bucket, if you will. And you might be wondering, like, why autoimmunity? Like, how did you pick that? That seems kind of random. But my goodness. So you all out there, you're probably aware, you probably know 6 people with thyroid disease, right? I know, holy moly, I know probably hundreds of people with thyroid disease. Ashley, you probably do too.
Oh, yeah.
And so here's what you need to know about thyroid disease. And this is just one autoimmune disease. What you need to know is that most thyroid disease in America is caused by autoimmunity. And so when you have low thyroid, when someone has low thyroid, chances are very good that the reason they have low thyroid is because they have an autoimmune disease. So that's just one. That's not even talking about, and in fact, if this is kind of piquing your interest, I want you to go back and listen to our autoimmunity episodes. They're going to be linked in the show notes. But yeah, we did a much deeper dive into all things autoimmunity, and that was way back in the beginning, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, literally our second, third, and fourth episodes. So go back to last year.
Yeah.
And we also did a series on thyroid, I believe.
That's true. Yeah. No, I think we did.
Yeah,
I think we did.
I'll link those as well.
Okay, cool. So autoimmunity is such a huge topic now, and it's not something that's getting better. Incidence and prevalence is absolutely increasing in the community, and so since so many people, this is probably the largest disease bucket that we could possibly talk about, and so this will apply to the most the largest number of people with chronic disease. And so that's kind of how we arrived at this. Plus, autoimmunity is a special interest area of mine, and I have lots of patients with autoimmunity. Ashley trains lots of people with autoimmunity, and so there are some intricacies that are related to people with autoimmunity that often get overlooked when it comes to training, when it comes to eating, when it comes to setting up diet plans and those kinds of things. And so, if you're out there and you're wondering, gosh, where the heck do I start? Because my doctor told me that what I eat is not going to matter. I just need to be on these drugs. And what I do
Yes.
is not going to matter. I just need to be on these drugs. And if you get a really good doctor, they'll say, oh, watch your stress. But
Yeah.
that's about the extent of it. So yeah.
Yeah. Which if you haven't if this is your very first episode listening to the double A, welcome.
Uh-huh.
But if
And where
you
have you
are
been?
a yes, exactly. But if you are a frequent listener, you know by now that we are all about that there is so much more you can do for your health than just a medicine um, or a pill that you can take. So we are huge believers that food and movement is medicine, and there is a lot that the body is capable of doing if fed and moved properly. So
Yep. Yep.
so let's
Absolutely.
let's let's start off with, setting up macros. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're new and this is again your first episode, macros are basically the three primary nutrients that our bodies have to have, and that's protein, carbs, and fat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like every caloric source that you can ingest is either going to be protein, fat, or carbs. That's it. There's no other choice. And you can say, well, what about fiber? Well, that's underneath the carb umbrella. So fiber is a carbohydrate. So literally everything that you put in your mouth that contains calories is either a protein, a fat, or a carbohydrate. So that that's not a lot. That's not that's not too much to think about, right? It's just three
Mm-mm.
things. And yet it's just absolutely dumbfounding for a lot of folks, to include Ashley and myself until we, did a lot of study and did this for a living. And so, yeah, we're just trying to push some information out that is healthful and also
Mm.
helpful for people to set up. See what I did there?
I
That was,
did.
uh-huh.
Very nice.
Thank you. Uh,
Andrea is the queen of words.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just live to see Ashley's face smirk over there. So yeah, so we'll talk about setting up those macronutrients. Like how do you know how much to eat? And so again, I think Ashley did a really masterful job on that first one, setting up just the importance of and how to find out what your isocaloric state is. Okay, so how many calories do you need to feed your body in order to not lose or gain any weight? What is your maintenance number of calories? And that is really, really important, right? Because obviously, if you don't want to lose weight, then we don't want you choosing macronutrient numbers that will end up resulting in weight loss. And certainly, if you don't want to gain weight, then we don't want you picking macros that are going to result in unwanted weight gain either. So go back and listen to that episode and find all of these begin with find your maintenance calories. Okay.
Yes.
So then now let's move on to how are these fractions, these protein, fat, and carbohydrate numbers, how are these any different for autoimmunity than they would be for, just a normie out there that doesn't have chronic disease. All right. So if we're talking about a 30, 35-year-old woman who's got autoimmune disease versus one that doesn't, what's going to be different?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, so with autoimmune disease, I want you to think about the body being in a constant chronic state of inflammation. It is literally attacking itself all the time. So this is, whether you feel it or not, the body is under a constant state of attack coming from itself. Okay. So this is a chronic state of stress. It's a chronic state of disease. And so we don't want to cause any more stress on this body than is already there because of the disease state. So um because of that, I'm going to start with carbohydrate, even though we almost exclusively start with protein always, because we are so, so big on protein. And we're going to talk about that for sure. But I want to start on carbohydrate because I feel like so many folks are on this low-ish carb. So many women in particular
Mhm.
are on this low-ish carb lifestyle because the pendulum needed to swing, right? We still, in fact, we still have women who are eating like 80% of their calories from carbohydrate. They're out there and there's lots of them. But in the health spaces, people are who are pursuing Ashley services, who are pursuing functional medicine as their primary care. These are the folks that are generally more healthfully minded, and so they often, like the women, will say, "Well, I'm restricting carbohydrate, and I feel a lot better, and I've been doing this for 3 to 4 months." And so when it comes to autoimmunity and when it comes to women, and I know we've talked about this before, but I just want to reiterate, women do better on carbohydrate. They do. We need
Yep.
some. We can't get away with none. It will make you feel so crummy and it will tax your body immeasurably over time. So you want to make sure that you are getting adequate levels of carbohydrate. And I would say for people with autoimmune disease, especially if they are in the middle of a flare, she will need more carbohydrate.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So,
and you might be listening and be like, "But Andrea, I feel so good on keto. I started it a few weeks ago." Um,
a
what do you
few
say to
weeks
that
ago is the
individual?
key. Yeah, a few weeks ago is the key because it's not going to last. Um, Here's the thing, you cleaned up your diet by going
Yep.
keto. That's
Mhm.
what you did. Because people aren't really doing the dirty keto anymore like they used to, right? When
Right.
Atkins first came out 20 years ago, oh, 25 years ago, 28 years ago, when that all first came out, people were eating, eggs and bacon and, um, gosh,
Probably more
just,
vegetables because they were putting olive oil or butter on them.
well, I
Well,
would say
Atkins, not
no.
not
Yeah,
for Atkins,
Atkins.
sorry,
Yeah.
but for
For
keto.
Atkins, oh my gosh, they were just, yeah, it was basically like bacon and eggs and conventionally raised fatty meat,
Mhm.
as far as the eye could see. And
That's true.
so not only was it not sustainable, but it really, really jacked up your lab numbers, and you didn't feel good over time. You felt amazing to start, right? But then you did not feel good over time because the body really can't subsist on that. And women in particular do better with some carbohydrate in the mix. And so, as we've kind of swung away from that, what's called dirty keto or Atkins, people will source their meats better, right? They'll eat grass fed, grass finished. They will seek out, um, you know, uh, well raised animals. They will seek out better sources of protein. They'll seek out more quality, sources of fats. That's a huge one now. Um, so people are doing better. But what I think people need to hear, especially women with autoimmunity, is that you can't just let the carbohydrate go by the wayside.
Mhm.
It really needs to be incorporated into your diet. So let's put some numbers to this. So how much are we really talking about here? Um, so again, I kind of harken back to zone percentages, that 30, 30, 40. That's a really, really good place to start, especially if you have been restricting. Okay. So 40% carbohydrate, 30% fat, 30% protein. All right. So let's just start there. So if you had, let's see, 15, let's say, oh, not 1500. Let's just say 2000 for the sake of rounding it out. All right. So let's say that 2000 calories is your maintenance. Now that's going to be a little higher. You're super active. But 2000 calories a day, 40% of that is going to be 800 calories. So that's going to come from carbohydrate. Now you divide that by 4, and that's going to be 200 grams of carbs. Okay. 200 grams of carbs per day. That's going to seem like an awful lot. And we can always adjust, but that is a really, really good place to start for someone
Mhm.
that's got autoimmunity. So then, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, if you're freaking out by the 2,000 calories amount,
Mm.
then go back to that first episode and
Yes,
figure out
please.
your maintenance
Yeah,
calories.
right. Exactly.
Because most
Exactly.
likely it's not 2,000, we're just
No, it
using easy
isn't.
math.
It isn't, right. We're just doing quick math here. But to take the same numbers, the 2000 calories, the 30% for fat and for protein, we're talking about oh good grief, what, 600 calories?
What did you say? Sorry, 2,000 what?
2000, yeah, 600 calories for fats and then 600 calories for protein.
Oh, yeah. Mhm. Yep.
Okay, so for protein, that's going to put you at 150 grams of protein.
Yep.
Um, Now, again, 2000 is not your number.
Right.
I can assure you, especially if you have autoimmunity. Oh my gosh, your body is probably incredibly efficient because it is very inflamed, and
And
so it.
remember,
Mhm.
efficient isn't good.
That's right. That's right. Your body is so efficient. Think of an efficient car that hardly needs any gas at all. So you don't want an efficient body that hardly needs any food at all,
Right.
right? So and if you, and this is one of the things that the body does when it's dealing with chronic illness and chronic stress. Because of chronic illness, it will ratchet up efficiency because
Right.
it doesn't want you burning, 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 right? It doesn't want the furnace too hot because that ratchets up stress too. Like,
Mhm.
it's trying to heal, it wants you to slow down.
Remember, the body's only job is to survive, and
Right.
so it is going to become efficient to be able to do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. So we're talking 150 grams of carbs for this 2000 calorie diet. And we're talking, let's see, 600 divided by 9.
It's
What the heck is that?
67-ish.
Okay, 67 grams of fat. All right. So that's what it is for a 2000 calorie diet. But that just gives you an idea of kind of what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
So go ahead and start with zone. And then what you can do over the next, like, do that for 30 days and hit those numbers. Learn how to hit those numbers. Then you can start monkeying with it and say, well, let's see how I feel by ramping up my protein a little bit and maybe ratcheting back my carbohydrate. Or you can take a little bit from fat. Don't
Mhm.
take all from fat though, because fat is very calming.
Mhm.
All right. Fat will calm inflammation. Think of fat as like insulation, right? There's no electricity. There's no signal getting through insulation. It's like the covering on a wire. Um Fat is insulatory, and it is calming, and it will, if it's the right kind of fat, it will quell inflammation. All right. So it is doubly important for those of you with autoimmunity that you choose the right kinds of fats, all right? And also that you get out of your diet the inflammatory kinds of fats. So this is going to be, um, it's a little too simplified, but it's a good rule of thumb to remember. So omega 3s, things like fish oil, that is going to be good fats, all right? Things like omega 6s, like, oh gosh, canola oil.
Ugh.
Get those vegetable oils out of your pantry. There are
Yes.
fats aplenty. If you need something savory, use olive, avocado, red palm. You can use tallow. You can use duck fat. All of those stabilized fats. If you need something to cook savory, if you need, and
Ghee.
and then people will say, yeah, ghee is great too. And then people will say, well, what if I want to make something sweet? Like, what if I'm making granola or something like that? You absolutely can use coconut oil. You can
Mhm.
use butter, like grass-fed butter, Kerrygold, or ghee. There's lots and lots of choices. Avocado is really a good choice too because it's relatively flavorless.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So then the next thing will be fiber. So
Mm.
fiber is really important. In fact, you need to be having enough fiber. I always give the goal of 25 to 35 grams a day. That is my blanket goal across the board. Everybody needs to be getting that. But I also want you to keep track of your physiology. Okay. So you need to be pooping daily. That is just the bottom line. You need to be pooping daily.
Pun intended.
That's what I didn't even mean to do that one. Thank you. I'm glad somebody's listening. Yeah, so you got to be eliminating daily. That's so critically important. If you are not, that will add to your inflammatory and stress burden. So you need to get that fiber up there because
Yep.
you're also feeding bacteria in your gut, right? You're feeding good microbes in your gut. So that is critically important. Now, the final the final word on dietary, like where to start dietarily for
Mm.
people with AI, and this probably should have been the first thing that I said, but I wanted to start with macros. The absolute most important thing that you can do for a body that has autoimmunity is get off the gluten.
Yep.
You've got to be gluten free, period.
Mhm. And you're probably like, "Oh, it's okay. I've tried the whole gluten-free diet before and it really didn't do anything for me."
Yeah. No, you need to get off the gluten because didn't we do
Yo,
I'm
it's
pretty
in our autoimmune
yeah. Okay.
episodes.
Good.
So
Listen to those.
there's Andrea goes into depths of why you need to get on off of gluten,
Yeah.
and it's quite fascinating. She goes through how it literally works in the body. So we won't spend time on that today because she did such an excellent job in those autoimmune
Oh, thank
episodes.
you.
Actually, they're literally our most listened to
Mm,
episodes.
mhm.
So they're a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, so that is and the final word is you may not think that you feel anything, but please go back and listen because it's so much more than how you feel in that moment.
Yep,
Okay.
exactly.
All right. And so then Ashley and I went on to talk about like for the last two episodes, we we told you how to set up your macros, but then we also we also talked about what does exercising look like, right?
Mhm.
What does
Yeah.
daily exercising look like? And then I also want to talk a little bit at the end here about supplements and because you really can't get away from some targeted supplementation when you have autoimmunity. They are extremely helpful. They've been a game changer for me.
Mhm.
I've been taking certain supplements for, gosh, probably 15 years now. And I know it's been a game changer for me and my life. It's a game changer for my patients. Um, so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end too. But let's talk about what does exercising look like. So Ashley, let's say that you have a gal show up and let's say she's in her actually let's put her in her 50s. Okay, she's in her 50s, she's not in shape, she's never exercised regularly before. She wants to take a class, she wants to get in shape, she wants to build muscle because she's been hearing all of these things about when you're in menopause, you got to build muscle, you got to have as much muscle as you can. So she wants to hit it and hit it hard.
Mhm.
And she says, "Oh, by the way, I have rheumatoid arthritis. No, it's not under control, and I'm not on any medication. And yeah, no, I hurt every day of my life. So what are you gonna do with this lady?"
Well, the best thing that she can start doing is just start moving lightly. So,
Mm-hmm.
obviously her joints are inflamed. She's
Yeah,
in pain. She doesn't
yeah,
feel good. So the
yeah.
last thing I want to do is put her under a massive amount of stress with a
Mm-hmm.
load of resistance training.
Right.
So, obviously, one of the best things that somebody can do is walk. Like
Mm-hmm.
now, I do have a client with RA, and she loves to walk. It's getting
Mm.
a little more difficult because her feet are starting to hurt.
Mm. Mhm.
So things things like even foot strengthening exercises that are very low
Oh, yeah.
impact is something that I uh, have given her.
Mhm.
So, doing some like simple towel exercises, just lifting up each toe individually, which is extremely hard if you try it.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually cannot do it. So props to you if you
I don't
can.
think I can either. I'm
Yeah, it's
trying.
it's a whole
Yeah.
mind game down there.
Mhm.
But then, you know, making sure that they have good support in their shoes too,
Yeah.
so like making sure,
Yeah.
you might even need to go see an orthopedic, or you might need to go to an actual
Mhm.
professional foot
Like a
store that can
podiatrist or
actually,
yeah.
yeah, so they can actually fit you with some really good shoes. She
Mhm.
recently just switched over to Hoka's, and it's been a world or game changer for her.
I'm in them right now.
Yeah. So things that are low impact. And then obviously, because we want to be building strength, we're going to be doing some, very doable body weight
Mhm.
exercise. So sit
Right.
stands out of a chair, which sounds super simple, maybe to somebody that doesn't have RA, but for somebody
Mhm.
that's in a chronic state of inflammation and pain, sit
Yeah.
stands are probably going to be a pretty tough exercise at
Yeah,
first.
I agree.
Doing elevated or wall push-ups, doing
Mhm.
some band things. So we're not necessarily just pumping the iron at first. We're starting
Mhm.
off really, really slow. We're Something that I'm big on is really seeing how the body responds after a workout. So I'm asking questions in that second session of like, how did you feel after your workout? And she might be like, you know what, I felt amazing after the workout, but the next day, oh my gosh, I was really hurting and really sore, and I was feeling things that I hadn't felt in a long time. So I'll prod a little deeper in sense of like, okay, can you explain to me, like, was this more joint related? Was this muscle related? Because if you've never worked out, or it's been a long time since you've worked out, no matter what your fitness level, you're
Yeah.
gonna be sore. So we
Yeah.
want to we want to defer, a good feeling of pain, quote unquote,
Mhm.
versus a bad one. So I'm just
Right.
diving deeper into that. And then we're not doing like plyometrics,
Right.
anything like that. We're pretty much feet
Mhm.
on the ground.
Yeah, so you're
Literally.
you're not gonna be doing, like, box jumps and
No.
wall
Or
balls and yeah,
yeah, or jumping jacks or
right.
anything like that. We're pretty low impact.
Yeah. And so what Ashley's describing here is, and she mentioned that there's some soreness that you can't get away from, but she's not just going to pound this individual to get her as strong as possible, as fast as possible, because in order to grow muscle, you actually have to tear the muscle. So
Mhm.
we're creating little micro tears in the muscle, which again, for a normie, for a normal person that doesn't have chronic disease, that's fantastic, right?
Right.
Like tear that muscle, grow it bigger. But for somebody that whose body is in the middle of like an autoimmune flare, they're already trying to heal. So
Right.
there's not a lot of cells that are not already busy trying to heal, to be recruited to, oh hey, let's come build some muscle over here. No way,
Yeah.
they're just trying to survive. So
Mhm.
really all you're doing is increasing the inflammatory burden at that point.
Right. Yeah, and so obviously exercise or resistance training is a inflammatory, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're creating inflammation,
Yes.
but it's a quote unquote good inflammation
Mm-hmm.
because it's a, well, how would you
It's like
explain it? It's like,
hormesis. Yeah, I describe this as like homeopathy,
mhm,
right? You get a little bit of the poison um, in order to make you stronger. You
right.
get a little bit of the stress to make you stronger.
But Andrea made a good point, is like if you're already in this inflammatory state, your body's literally just trying to survive. And
Mm-hmm.
so we can't just do normal quote unquote workouts
Mm-hmm.
to build that lean muscle. We're going to probably have to take it a lot slower. And something that we talked a lot about in that first episode about calories and finding your maintenance,
Mm-hmm.
is this something that you might be able to just get to where you want to be tomorrow? In fact, it's probably going to take months.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, the client that I do have with RA, um, the first several sessions were so basic. She couldn't
Mm.
even do a wall push-up. Like,
Mm.
that was
Mhm.
so hard, and now we're able to do weighted chest press.
Oh,
We can
that's
do,
amazing.
so
Mhm.
yeah, maybe she can't still do a full-on push-up from the ground because of her hands and things,
Mhm.
but we're able to add some resistance with weight.
That's awesome. Yeah, and so I would also I would also say that um I'll encourage people to watch overheating.
Mhm.
So when we're talking about exercise, when we're talking about recovery, there are forms of exercise that really overheat you. So things like hot yoga, which again is phenomenal. Like to work out in that kind of heat, that that really will drive your stress way up. And again, in a strong, like a normal body that's not struggling with chronic illness, that is a wonderful way to make you stronger. But in an already struggling body, that's not the best way to spend the time. So
Mhm.
um even watching time spent in the sauna. So a lot of people will do recovery in these temperature extremes, right? So they will cold plunge or they will like hot sauna for long periods of time. So I would caution against either one of those extremes because again, that's going to be piling on the stress.
Yep.
And then even time spent outside in really hot weather.
Yep.
You want to watch that too because I mean, in how many ways can you say it? You're adding stress to an already stressed body. So we're really looking for we're really looking for um, really high stress items and replacing them with lower stress items. So something like getting in a sauna that is at a reasonable temperature for 10 to 15 minutes and then get
Mhm.
out.
Yep.
Take a cool shower, right? If you're already in the shower, go ahead and turn it to cool, not ice cold, but turn it to
Mhm.
cool water and then stand there for a couple of minutes before you get out. You'll get some benefit from that.
Yep.
And it's so much less stressful than like an ice plunge. Now, Ashley, you are in the land of endurance athletes there in Colorado.
Mhm.
There, in fact, there's probably more studies on endurance and high altitude athletes done in Colorado than maybe any other state in the nation.
Yeah, probably. A lot of
Yes,
CrossFit athletes move here
mm-hmm,
during off season to train.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I would also caution against
Mhm.
endurance activities. So uh, and oh my gosh, I can think of 5 to 10 patients just like right off the top of my head, and some of these were nutrition clients, and then some of them are family practice patients. But these folks are who in their you know early 20s up to about 30, they were endurance athletes and they did really strenuous stuff. And sometimes it looks like CrossFit, and sometimes it looks like ultra marathons or these ultra long bicycle events or things like that, or triathlons, things like that. Okay. So again, endurance activities, anyone who is an endurance athlete will tell you, yes, I know that this is not ultimately good for my body. Like running a marathon, they've done blood work on people who at the beginning of a marathon and then people who complete the marathon, and the blood work is worse. Like
Mhm.
running the marathon is not good for you.
Yeah.
It's not doing an Ironman, it's not good for your body. You have to recover after that. Just like
Yeah.
playing a football game is not good for you. It's not good for you to get mowed over by a 300-pound dude, several times during the game. But you recover from that, right? Like that's your sport. You sacrifice for that sport. But again, with autoimmunity, the two do not mix. So
Right.
endurance sports don't mix with autoimmunity. And I have had to take away And I say take away. We obviously, my patients and I make all decisions together, so
Mm,
it's not
yeah.
like some dictatorship here. But we talk it through, and we determine how are we going to wean you off of this activity, and then what are we going to wean you onto. And usually that looks like walking,
Mhm.
stretching,
Yep.
those kinds of activities, and that's not easy for people. It
Mm,
isn't easy, because you almost get addicted to like the endurance. You get addicted to those endorphins. You get
mhm.
addicted to that high that comes from endurance activity, and
Mm,
so it isn't easy to get people to tone down their activity.
yeah.
So what about hit? Will you have them do hit?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, be
What does that look like?
careful.
Yes.
Yeah, so obviously we already mentioned that we're not doing like box jumps or,
Mhm.
jump ropes or
Mhm.
something like that. So, maybe like something like a rower. I love the
Yeah.
rower. It's very gentle on the joints.
Mhm.
You might have to go for a little extended period of time until you can kind of build up some strength and pull
Mhm.
in the rower. Could
Yeah.
look like biking.
Yep.
It could also, um, it could look like rope slams too, because you're not
Mhm.
necessarily jumping, you're just kind of moving the arms as long as the shoulders and hands are okay. Because if you are in a chronic state of RA, a lot of times the hands are hit pretty hard,
Mhm. Yeah.
and shoulders. So, um, doing things like that, you could potentially even do some ball slams, depending, probably very light ball slams. So we're probably going more for um, relative speed in that sense instead of necessarily heavy.
Mhm.
Um, Potentially some sled pushes. Again, relatively light, most likely,
Yeah.
not necessarily running, but just kind of spiking that heart rate.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And then also the number of rounds of hit also
Exactly.
matters. So
Yeah.
you can tone that back too. And I'll tell people to start with I'll just have them do air squats. I'll just have them do, like Ashley was saying, just something that's gentle on the joints and something that they can tolerate for, 20 to 30 seconds at a time, but also gets their heart rate up.
Yeah.
And so I'll just tell them to start with 3 to 5 rounds of that 3 days a week. Just do that. Start there.
Yep.
Then you can do 2 rounds of 3 to 5 sets. Okay.
Hmm.
three
Yep.
days a week. And
Yep.
then you can maybe go up to like some basic hit circuits. But again, nothing too uh horribly strenuous where it's taking you many, many minutes to recover and for your heart rate to come down. And that's a
Yeah.
good way to judge,
Hmm.
is how quickly is your heart rate coming down.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
And
go ahead.
remember, hit is different than Tabata. So Tabata is usually like a 20-second on, 30, 10-second off, or 30-second on, 30-second
Mm-hmm.
off. Um, it's a lot shorter rest period where true hit is allowing that heart rate to come down and
Mm-hmm.
then you're spiking it again.
Yep, exactly. And then finally, I guess a couple of things. So strength training. I think
Hmm.
strength training is amazing. And
Yes.
I kind of tongue in cheek, I put on my outline, you should build your gym sessions like a power lifter, because Ashley and I, we would spend, I don't know, crazy amounts of time, like 2 hours, 2.5 hours working out, which is nuts. But
Mainly because we chatted a lot, but
mainly because we chatted. But you'll find if you look around if you look around the gym, powerlifters are not like cruising through their workouts super super fast, right?
yeah,
They're
no.
resting between sets. They're on their phones. They're walking around. So lift like a powerlifter,
Yep.
right? Allow your heart rate to come back down after those big efforts. Um
Which is
and
really hard for some people.
yeah, it
I have
is.
clients that are like, "We can't rest. We have to keep going." And it's like, "No, you can. You
Yeah.
actually need to."
Yeah.
Um, because I don't know if we've done an episode on really progressive overload specifically,
Ooh,
but
we should definitely do that.
yeah, because we want to be practicing progressive overload in order to build that lean muscle mass.
Mhm.
And in order to really push the body,
Mhm.
we have to have recovery, and recovery not only after each workout in a entirety, but even after each set.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so, hey, I wanted to make a note of that because we need to do that. Will you? I can't find our note, Ashley. I
I'll
can't
find
find our note.
it.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
And then finally, the last thing that I also really like is incorporating isometrics. So
Yes.
these are things like planks and wall
Mm-hmm.
sits. So these are literally exercises where you don't move anything. Like that's why they're called isometric. You're not moving. So you get into a plank position and you just hang out there for
Mm-hmm.
as long as you can. So these are great exercises for people who are in the midst of chronic disease or autoimmunity. So, yeah, in fact, wall sits, I know we've talked about this before on a previous episode, but they have been scientifically proven to reduce blood pressure more than any other kind of exercise. And in fact, more than any other kind of isometric exercise, too. So
That's
they're very powerful.
amazing.
Yeah, so you're literally not doing anything. You're not moving at all,
Yep.
and yet
Yep.
you're getting stronger.
That's
So
awesome.
isometrics for the win. Now the final thing. Did you want to add anything else to exercise, or do you think we covered it?
No, I think that did it.
Okay, cool. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was supplements, and we didn't talk about this on any of the other episodes because I don't think it's nearly as important as it is for this episode. Like for perimenopause and for menopause, yes, there are plenty of supplements that are really, really important, but your body is not really being torn apart at the seams. Your body is not trying to damage itself irreparably. So this is a little bit different of a situation. And so calming the inflammation becomes really the name of the game here. And so I would say for those people who have autoimmunity, really the premier importance is to control inflammation in any way that you can. So focusing on supplements that have anti-inflammatory properties. So kind of the trifecta that I would always tell people to begin with is vitamin D, which everybody with autoimmunity, almost without exception, needs to be on vitamin D. Also
Mm.
fish oil, and then curcumin. Those are the top three, and I usually will have people take those together. So vitamin D, 5 to 10,000 units a day, but get with your provider and see what they would like to have you on. And then fish oil, 2 to 3 grams of combined DHA EPA daily. Okay. And then curcumin. This is that extract of turmeric that is highly anti-inflammatory. It blocks NF kappa beta. It reduces IL-6. It's like a real powerhouse kind of anti-inflammatory. So you want to make sure though, curcumin is a phytonutrient. So it's one of those brightly colored extracts from plant matter, okay? Kind of like berberine, kind of like resveratrol, okay? So curcumin needs fat in order to be driven across the intestinal lining, okay? So you can't just take plain old curcumin unless I do use it in some clinical circumstances, but for this, you're looking for curcumin either with phytosome or mariva or piperine. Okay, so these are the things that you'll want to look for on your curcumin, and I generally recommend that people take 1,500 milligrams a day. And so they're usually 500 milligram capsules, so you'll need to take either 2 in the morning and 1 at night, or 1 in the morning and 2 at night. Doesn't matter which one.
And why
Um,
are you separating them?
because of absorption, it's
Okay.
just better for the body to absorb, and also for half-life.
Oh,
So you get 12 hours of activity, and then you bump it again in 12 hours. Now, I also wanted to mention cod liver oil because this is kind of a powerhouse. Ashley's smiling because it's my desert island food and I get it in there wherever I can, that and liver. So cod liver oil, if you could take a teaspoon of that, or a teaspoon and a half, like half a tablespoon a day, that would be great. And I kind of like the same brands of cod liver oil as I do fish oil, and that is Nordic Naturals, Vital Nutrients, and Pharmax. Those are all quality brands that have affordable prices associated with them. So, yeah. And then let's see the next. So those are the primary anti-inflammatories. Then the next category would be stress, controlling stress. So I will use adaptogens in folks. Now you have to be careful because some adaptogens, like for instance, adaptogenic mushrooms, can spike the immune system and cause it. They can entice the immune system into overreaction, which is already happening with autoimmunity. So you really want to be careful with mushrooms. I don't recommend that anyone with autoimmunity just go willy-nilly into trying adaptogenic mushrooms like, lion's mane, cordyceps, all of those reishi that we talk about. I would give those a bit of latitude. And instead, I would do things like holy basil, tulsi. There's a blend that I really like from Integrative Therapeutics. I use it in practice a lot. It's called Cortisol Manager. And I've taken this for years. It works well. And then I've got a lot of patients on it. Now, one of the things that is always going to be in these formulations is ashwagandha. So one caution with ashwagandha, if you have significant joint and muscle pain, I would caution you, be careful with ashwagandha because it is a nightshade and sometimes it can flare people with, myalgias or arthralgias. So you want to be careful with that. And then finally, this is not a supplement, rather it's a prescription medication, but
Yeah.
it's awfully benign. And so you might want to talk with your doc about whether or not low-dose naltrexone might be appropriate for you in helping you reduce inflammation.
Yeah. And we did a whole episode on low
Oh,
dose
we did two.
naltrexone.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did
two,
two.
sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So go back and listen to those as well. So
Yes, you
I'll
got a lot of homework,
I
people.
will link all of these for you, but
Yeah.
yeah, they're easy to find as well. So
Mm-hmm.
no, this was super super helpful, and I hope that the listeners, if you're dealing with some type of autoimmune AI,
Mm,
that you one, go back and listen to our autoimmune episodes, but then
mm-hmm.
really start looking at how to set up your diet and even your exercise,
Yeah,
and looking at these
absolutely.
supplements as well. So thank you, Andrea.
Well, thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
That was good info.
Well,
Er,
if you have enjoyed this episode or any other episode that we have done, we would so appreciate a rating on whatever platform that you are listening on. Not only helps the um, listeners that find our show, but
mhm.
it helps them find our show because it bumps our shows up into the algorithm world. And if you have any suggestions on topics that you would like to listen to, or maybe you have questions on episodes that you've heard, please always hit us up at our email, which is askAApodcast@gmail.com, or shoot us a message on the grams, and all of that information is linked in our show notes. So lots of links in the show notes, but go take a look, and thank you again for listening, and we will catch you on the next episode.
The content provided in the AA podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The podcast is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The information and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical advice.